Okay. Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Sujata Gadkar-Wilcox. I'm running for state representative here in Trumbull, and welcome to our community forum on Connecticut's economic recovery during and after COVID. In this forum, we'll explore how to ensure that businesses get the emergency relief that they need to survive through the pandemic, but also how the pandemic may change the nation's demographics and economy, and how Connecticut can best position itself to take advantage of those changes. We'll be taking questions live from the audience. So if you have questions, please type them into Facebook, into the Facebook live feed, and then we'll incorporate them throughout the course of the conversation. So it's my pleasure to have here my colleague and friend, Professor Fred McKinney. Fred is the Carleton Highsmith Chair for Innovation and Entrepreneurship and Director of the People's United Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Quinnipiac University. He holds a BA from UCLA and was the first African-American to earn a PhD in economics from Yale. In addition to his academic career, he's worked for the RAND Corporation and on the President's Council of Economic Advisors and has founded several successful businesses. He has a long resume. I'm cutting it down for you. In addition, Fred was recently appointed to the Connecticut Minority Business Advisory Board. And most importantly, he's been a resident of Trumbull for many years. So thank you, Fred, for joining us and for taking the time to have this discussion.
Well, thank you, Sujata, for having me.
Great, wonderful. So let me start with a question until the questions come in. What do you think that is the general outlook for the business environment in Connecticut as we're heading into the fall, and potential opportunities for us?
Sure. Well, yeah, as everyone knows, I'm not sharing any news here. We've had a very tough last 5 months since February. When the outbreak hit, and initially the state and the country and the globe actually was shut down, and that had a tremendous negative impact on all businesses. But I think it also had a particularly negative impact on small businesses who, in general, did not have access to the capital to keep them afloat during the shutdown. And so, we are beginning to see some signs of return, not just in Connecticut and the United States, but literally around the world. So the second quarter was a horrible quarter for Connecticut and the country. The third quarter, which we're still in, seems to be improving. There seems to be some improvement in the third quarter in the economy here locally. And a lot of that has to do with having people get back to work. And we're still struggling at it, though. As you know, school has started, and a number of schools are having difficulty making that transition back to what the way things were prior to the pandemic. But I'm cautiously optimistic about the Connecticut economy. But I do think, though, that this recession, people have to understand that this was not a normal economic downturn. This is the greatest downturn in the U.S. economy since the Great Depression. So this is not even a normal recession. This is much deeper than even the Great Recession that we experienced in beginning in 2008 through 2010, which was a difficult sort of circumstances for Connecticut and the country. So I think it's going to take some time. I think that we'll have a slow recovery, but that doesn't mean it won't be without some real bright spots.
Great, thank you so let's talk about the support that businesses may need now. What would you regard as the most valuable parts of the federal and state emergency assistance to businesses in Connecticut, and what's lacking there too? What else can be done? What other support from the state and in terms of federal relief is necessary?
Yeah, well, I think in general, there are several things that were passed at the federal level and also at the state level that supported businesses and the Connecticut economy. I think the biggest impact occurred at the federal level with the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program, which essentially provided small businesses and businesses that actually weren't so small with resources to continue to hire their workforce, to keep their workforce employed. But I think even a bigger influence on the economy was the enhanced unemployment compensation program that put an additional $600 a week in the hands of unemployed for filers for unemployment insurance. And that was in addition to what the state paid those unemployed workers. But we still are seeing, the consequences of this pandemic. Just today, we had 1 million new initial filers of unemployment in the country as a whole. So, that's still, it's kind of mind-boggling to think that 1 million new filers for unemployment is actually a good thing. But, several months ago, there was 6 million first-time filers in a week. And so we've come down in terms of the growth in the number of filers. But what's good is, at the federal level, is we had resources going to those workers, and that unemployment compensation provided workers with the income that they needed to continue to support their families at levels close to what they did prior to the pandemic. Right now we're in this hiatus where the federal government is not supplying that $600 bonus or addition to workers. And I think that's a critical thing for not just the country, but the whole. The workers and households and families need that money to continue to pay for things that they need: their rent, their utilities, mm-hmm. and their food. And so those necessities, that's where that money is going to come from when people are not working.
Right. So in terms of perhaps, building Connecticut's economy, strengthening it, what kind of critical industries do you see is maybe something as an investment for Connecticut going forward to help us in that, slowly rebuild our economy?
Well, I think one of the things that we really have to do during this time is be creative. We're going to have to take some risks. I personally don't think that we are going to go back to where we were pre-pandemic. And I don't think we're going to go back for a number of reasons. Also, I don't think that going back to normalcy is the most desirable place to go anyway. I think this pandemic has revealed some pretty significant challenges, some pretty significant problems with our economy. I mean, one of the biggest issues is inequality that we've seen, that the pandemic has revealed now inequality can mean your death if you're talking about healthcare. So I think that in terms of opportunities, entrepreneurs, I'm a big believer in entrepreneurs. I run a center for entrepreneurship at Quinnipiac. And I know that entrepreneurs right now, the good ones, are thinking about what does the future look like and what should I do to essentially create a better future for myself, my company, my family, my community, my country, the globe. And so entrepreneurs are thinking about how you solve these problems. But I think government also has to be involved in this creativity to address the sort of the economic challenges that we're facing. And I think one of the things we've seen from the pandemic is work has changed. And so, we are working more likely from home if you can work from home. If you're doing work and you did most of your work sitting at a desk in front of a computer, and you went to work to do that, well, now because of the pandemic, you don't need to go to work to do that. You can do that from the comfort of your home.
Right.
But if you are making stuff, if you are still interacting directly with consumers, you don't have that luxury. You don't have that ability. So you still have to go to work. And what's also been revealed by this pandemic is, what is an essential worker? And how do we treat those essential workers? And so, we've learned that an essential worker is the person that bags your grocery at the local grocery store. That's an essential worker. But, the economy hasn't treated those workers with the type of respect that you might think they now deserve as we appreciate them. But I think in terms of where we're going in this economy and what we need, we're going to see companies that develop new technologies or changing technologies that make working at home easier, more productive, more enjoyable. And so I think the home has become more central to how workers in Connecticut will be working in the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
So I think that's one area.
That's and you're right about the essential workers, Fred. I mean, they kept all essential workers kept our economy going,
Mhm.
during the pandemic. And I have a question for you about entrepreneurship. So we talked about our students. It was interesting to me. We started teaching, and for both of us, students have mentioned that they've started a new business in the pandemic. Is this a good time for creative entrepreneurship, as you mentioned?
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the history of the American economy and American business, a lot of businesses were created during very difficult times.
That's
And
very interesting.
so, it's that's what separates entrepreneurs really from everybody else, quite frankly. Where most people see problems, entrepreneurs see opportunities, and it's because there are problems that entrepreneurs that solve those problems. Now, not every entrepreneur is going to solve every problem, but if you can solve these problems, if you can show consumers, workers, firms, and others things that and activities and services that maybe they didn't even know they needed until they saw it. And then when they see it, it becomes almost like, wow, I could have thought of that, but you didn't. So, but the entrepreneur gets the benefit of that. And I think that's what's going to happen. I'm optimistic. That's why I'm optimistic. I mean, most entrepreneurs and people who support entrepreneurs tend to be optimistic about the future, even during these difficult times. And that's not to discount how difficult these times are and how uncertain they are for people who are not entrepreneurs, who rely on, a job to support them and their families. So I'm thinking that areas where you'll see some creativity and entrepreneurship will be again in the home, whether it's work related or entertainment related. As people spend more time at home, they're going to be spending time improving their homes to do the types of things in their home that maybe they used to do or do something similar to that outside of the home.
What about technology, biotechnology, and even you talked previously about distribution chains and thinking about maybe creating more local distribution chain. Are those some potential opportunities maybe for people to think creatively and help our economy?
Exactly. I mean, so again, because of the pandemic, some of the weaknesses, the structural weaknesses in our economy, specifically about some sort of supply chain related, were again revealed. We learned that we were over dependent on China for certain types of products. And I think, before the sort of the globalization movement was, well, if somebody else can do it for less, then let them do it. And everybody benefits. They get employment. We get lower prices. Those lower prices turn into is disposable income for us. So everybody wins. And that's under normal circumstances. And this obviously was not normal, but it does demonstrate that economies are vulnerable to what some people call, and I don't like this term, but black swan events. These things are not normal. They're rare, and when they happen, and they do happen, if you don't have certain things in place, like the ability to supply your own economy with PPEs, which was the big issue,
Right.
you have problems. And so what you've seen is a real desire in this country and other countries around the world to sort of review what is essential. What are the types of things that no economy, maybe even at the state level, no state should be without an ability to do for the benefit of their citizens. And so that tells me that cost is only one of the important variables in determining what should be done or who should do it or what should be produced where. So we now have to look at things that maybe are cheaper to do someplace else, but that creates an opportunity for an entrepreneur to say, yes, if you look at my cost of production traditionally, yeah, I'm more expensive, but at least you have it.
Yeah.
And so I think those are things though that where government might have to get involved to make it worthwhile for these activities to stay. And so I think to a certain extent, this pandemic is good in helping people refocus on what's the purpose of the economy. And it's not just to provide some service at the lowest possible cost.
Right. That's very interesting. And we really are going to have to reimagine in this new landscape. I thought it was interesting that I've already heard several students say that this is what they've been, doing. So it's very, very interesting. So when it comes to the closing of businesses in Connecticut, what can the state do to forestall the closing of businesses in services, transportation, and the entertainment sectors that can't open until, the next phase of reopening?
Well, I think, as I mentioned, the PPP was a big program that was a federal program that provided small companies, mid-sized companies with resources to retain their workforce. While I think that was good, I think the bigger problem that's facing businesses right now is not their ability to maintain and pay their workforce. Their bigger problem right now is how do you pay your fixed cost? And so this is where I think we need new policies to support businesses, because businesses now are seeing that, if you don't have if you're operating at 75% of customers because customers simply are not going to the store, it's hard to pay your rent, it's hard to pay your leases, it's hard to pay the debt to the banks that you might owe. It's hard to pay your insurance. So not just your property and casualty insurance, but your health insurance. So all of these fixed costs become more and more difficult to pay in an economy that's operating significantly below its capacity. And so, we still have double-digit unemployment, where going back, compared to, pre-pandemic, we were below 4% unemployment. So that's a big change in terms of consumer spending. So I think policies right now should be focused on how do we keep these businesses able to pay those fixed costs. And it's a challenging thing because the landlords want to be paid, the insurance companies want to be paid, the banks want to be paid, but somebody's got it. So, we got to figure out how to do that. And the way that we've kind of decided to do it is at the federal level. So some of these things are going to have to be addressed at the federal level. But I think at the state level, the state needs to continue for households, for instance, we have a moratorium on evictions. We need to extend that. I think that moratorium should also extend to businesses. Landlords should not be able to kick out a business or a home or a household during this time until we get the economy back on track.
Right. And what about other things like, business interruption insurance, things that will help a business continue?
Yeah. And again, that's a double-edged sword. I mean, somebody who's paying for that? The insurance companies are paying for that. So, there are some shoes to drop here that haven't dropped. And so that's why I said this is going to take some time for us to get out of this. But I do think, businesses are looking at, okay, how were we prepared, or what should we have done to better prepare for something like this? And so there'll be some changes in how businesses operate in the future. And I think that many of them will see the importance of insurance. Now, insurance is where Connecticut is strong. So we have a very strong insurance sector in Connecticut. So that's potentially good for the Connecticut economy.
Great. Thank you, Fred. And, congratulations on your recent appointment to the Connecticut Minority Business Advisory Board. Having people like you in the state providing your expertise, I think will help us reimagine, the way things can be or can certainly improve. So given your expertise on entrepreneurship in minority communities, what do you think the state needs to do to retain existing minority businesses and to attract new ones?
Well, the minority business community has been particularly hard hit. I was actually doing a national webinar today on Black businesses across the country. And there were 40% of Black businesses shut down during since February. That's a huge number. And so, those are businesses are still shut down. So these are businesses that are essentially left the landscape. And you ask, well, why? What happened? Well, again, these were businesses that did not have access to capital. Many of them weren't eligible or did not see that they were eligible for the PPP in the initial phases. And also, these were businesses that even when they became eligible, did not have the relationships with the the banks that were making loans. And so they were essentially literally in the back of the line when it came to these PPP loans. And many of them didn't get it or didn't get it in time to save their businesses. So I think that we should be really thinking hard about how do we shore up that have survived in minority communities, because these businesses are, they're small, but they are major employers of members of the community, the minority communities. So these are sources of income for the community, and we need to support them. And I think that means providing them with, and not loans, but I think they also are now talking about grants. We need to be making grants for these businesses. But longer term, I wrote an article not too long ago that addressed this issue. And because I had many people, particularly after George Floyd's situation, ask me, well, what can they do? And I told them, well, one of the things you can do is you can buy from some Black businesses. And that's easier said than done for some people because they don't know where they are. And so, I'm actually working on a project right now with the Black Business Alliance of Connecticut to help them identify these Black businesses, where they are, what they do, and who they serve. And I think if these businesses would be much better off if they could attract not just more Black consumers, but white consumers and consumers from across our state.
And that would be, as businesses do well, the economy does well, right? So yes, that would be a good thing for all of us.
Right.
What do you see as potential opportunity? People have been asking, now that we're seeing record numbers maybe of people coming into Connecticut from New York, from these dense urban areas, and Connecticut is very attractive in having the kind of balance that a lot of people are looking for. What kind of opportunities do we have as a state now, given the influx of people?
Yeah, exactly. So home prices and real estate are doing pretty well right now in Connecticut and other places where you have communities like we have a number of really suburban type communities in Connecticut. Home prices are rising, and as that happens, these new residents they need services, and so as people come into the state. As home construction increases, you're likely to see increases in consumption, in investment, and in the home ownership construction business. So, are not in the home construction business, and so I think those are opportunities: construction, real estate services, but eventually also retail services. These folks that are coming perhaps from cities or urban environments who want less density, they still want the types of access to the goods and services that they had in more dense environments. And so they'll be looking for those things, but they'll also be bringing those things. And so you might see, not just say city residents from New York coming to Connecticut, you might see those New Yorkers bringing in ways of doing business that they're familiar with in New York that are not as we're not as familiar with in our suburban communities.
Yes. And Fred, there's a question that just came in. If I'm out of work, if somebody's out of work, struggling from a struggling industry right now, what should they do to retrain themselves for a post-pandemic economy? It's a great question.
Yeah, it is. It's a phenomenal question, and and I'm almost hesitant to give you an answer. But what I will tell you, and I'll tell anyone, that I think now is the time that you as a worker need to be very adept in the use of technology that we see that we're beginning to use almost all the time. And so I think companies are going to be looking for people who have a facility with video technology, with remote learning, that things that can support those types of activities. I continue to believe that having an ability to communicate well verbally as well as in writing is important, and is a valuable skill that is always going to be valuable. So I think working in that area, being knowledgeable about the history, culture, politics, all of those things, to what we call in higher education, just the the liberal arts education, I believe is the answer.
The foundation. Yeah.
That's the foundation for all of these things. And but I think technology is at the base of that. If you that makes you adaptable. And that's why I said I'm hesitant, because I don't know where the economy is going to be 5 years from now.
Right.
But I do know that the technology is going to be important. So staying current on technology, I think, would be the key thing.
That's a great point, Fred. And I know that, we're teaching our students that, right? To critical thinking and the oral advocacy. So one question that came in for you, and you just said maybe you won't be able to answer, what will Connecticut's economy look like in 10 years? What will look different? And I know you said technology might be a part of it. And as a state, how can we take advantage of where the economy is going?
Well, if you look at the Connecticut economy, we have several industries where we have some real strengths, and one is defense, another is insurance, and another is education, and higher education in particular. And then we have a pretty big pharma, biohealth sector. If you look at those four industries, they are pretty strong through the pandemic. And so, defense is a federal expense for the most part. That's the money comes from the feds, but it's spent locally. So companies like Electric Boat, Sikorsky, GE, some other companies that are doing that type of work, I think they will continue to be strong. Our insurance sector, I have some questions about insurance, because while there will be a greater demand for insurance, the insurance companies, they've got some big bills to pay because of the crisis, and so they're gonna recover as well. They're gonna be in a cycle. The healthcare industry and the educational health, and the healthcare industry and education, I think will be good industries for Connecticut. I see that the pandemic may actually help Connecticut universities, colleges, and higher ed attract even more people. And so I think schools where we are at Quinnipiac are, it's not going to be guaranteed, but I think we're in a good position to attract residents from Connecticut and the surrounding states. And healthcare in general, I think it's going to continue to be strong in the foreseeable future.
Thank you, Fred. And I know you have another meeting to get to. And, it's really hard to talk about the economy right now as we're all kind of struggling through it. But thank you so much for providing a kind of optimism for where we can go, because I think it's important that we are looking toward the future and seeing the potential opportunities here. So it's always a pleasure to see you, Fred. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Well, thank you. And as you know, best of luck, and, continue doing the great work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Fred.
Okay, bye-bye.
Take care, and thank you everyone for joining us. Bye.